Let's now check out failure queues. So our objective for this one is, once our max number of retries has happened, we then want that message to go onto a failure queue where we can just go and observe those messages, see if we want to continue with them. If we can manually retry them. If not, we can just remove them from the failure queue, and that really is the end of them. Choose high definition for the best viewing experience, and if you'd like to join a growing group of software developers and take your skills to a new level, all you need to do is subscribe, click the little notification icon, and welcome. We'll start with our messenger.yaml file. If you're working around roughly the same version of me, then you may already have some defaults in your file which have been commented out, and what I'm looking at is this here. So under our transports, we already have our async, we have our sync, and then it gives you this commented out one here. If you don't have that, you can just add it in yourself, but I'm going to use this default because it's perfect for what I want, and it is basically a failed transport. So the name of the transport is failed, and it's using our doctrine default. So if we go and look at our .env file, when we set this up initially, we said that our messenger transport DSN would be doctrine default, so we're happy with that. But on that transport DSN, on that transport, we are then appending a queue, a failed queue. So we have question mark queue name equals failed. And so again, just a quick one on terminology. This will be a failed queue on a failed transport, but you'll often hear it just referred to as a failed queue, especially if you are only using one failed transport and one failed queue. Instead of saying the failed transport and the failed queue, you'll just refer to the whole thing as the failed queue. And so if you hear people referring to it as that, then that's most likely the setup that you've got, just one failed transport with one failed queue. Anyway, let's not keep talking about that. Let's go and set this up. So there's one other step we need to do, and that is to tell Messenger which transport we are using as our failure transport. And again, there's already a commented out default here, which is perfect for what we need. So failure transport is the failed transport, and that's the one which we've just set up by commenting that out. I'm just going to drop this below sync. That just feels a bit better to me. Let's go and set our queue worker running again. So the command is Symfony console messenger consume, then the async transport, and then VV. Just means verbose, it'll give us some information. Let's hit go. So that's up and running. Then all we need to do is just come back to our page, and I'm just going to do a couple of these so we get a couple of failures. So there's one, refresh, there's two. Okay, so back to our terminal. There is one other change which I think I'll make here. Because we set it up to 5 retries, it's quite tedious to watch it run this over 16 seconds. So I'm actually going to stop that, and I'm going to go up to where we set max retries. I'm just going to set it back to 3, which will be a total of 4 seconds, and that's a bit more reasonable, I think. So let's go and run this again. If we go over to our database and see what we have here, so I'll hit refresh. Okay, and so we can see we have two messages, ID 53 and ID 54. But if you notice, there is one change here, and the queue name this time is failed. So both of these messages have been sent to the failed queue. So what has happened is they've failed the X number of max retries, so that would have been 5 and 3 respectively, and now we have them in our failed queue. And so there's a way that we can go and inspect these and see if we want to keep them, if we want to retry them, do we want to get rid of them. I've created a notes file and pasted in some of the commands that I can use here. The first one is to have a look at all of the failed messages, and I can do that with Symfony console messenger failed show. So I'll open up a new tab and we'll drop that in there. Okay, so it tells me that there are 2 messages pending in the failure transport, and it shows what they are as well as what the error is. And if you remember, in the last one we just put an error in our exception there to say order could not be found. And one of the things I really like about this, it gives you little tips here. So if, for example, here it's telling me that if I want to see a particular message in detail, I can say messenger failed show followed by the ID. and then the name of the transport. So if we want to look at ID number 53, for example, I just need to give it the name or the ID of the message that I want to look at, append on there the option transport equals failed, and again VV. Let's see what it tells us about this one. Okay, so a lot more information this time. Class app message event order saved event. It tells us the error. It tells us the error class. So in our case, it was a runtime exception which we set up. It tells you the name of the transport. Loads of really useful information here. If you can imagine you're firing off different kinds of messages on different transports, then it's really good that you could be able to just go in and say exactly which message it was on which transport at which time, what was attempted, etc. As you can see here, we've got the message, we've got the exception, shows the full details of the runtime exception with the whole trace. Really, really useful. And so using that information, you can then make a decision. Do I want to retry that message, or shall I just get rid of it? And again, Messenger is really cool at this. It shows you how I can do each of those things. So this is the command that I would need if I wanted to retry it, and this is the command that I would need if I wanted to just get rid of it. So let's try them one by one. Symfony console messenger failed retry, ID is 53 and the transport is failed. Let's hit go. Okay, so let's say, do you want to retry? I can pick yes or no. Let's hit yes. And so it goes and tries again. But again, as you can see, we're getting this warning, error thrown while handling message, order saved event, sending for retry number 1. But you'll notice that there's only one retry. So when it gets sent to the failure transport here, when we do retry manually, it will only do it once. Or I should say, it will only do it once by default. Okay, let's show our failed messages again. So our failed messages in our failure queue at the moment are IDs 54 and 55. Let's have a look at 54. So I'm just going to grab this, copy it, paste it there, get some more details. Again, shows me all the details of that failed message. And this time, instead of retrying, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove it. So Symfony console messenger failed remove. I'm removing message with ID 54 from the failed transport. Hit enter. Again, it'll ask me if I'm sure about that. I'm just going to choose yes. And then it tells me message with ID 54 removed, which means there should be just one message there now. And that's correct. We just have one message left on our failure queue. Another thing I'll say about failure queues is that if it's something which you want to use, then Doctrine is the best option out of all of them. So that's just another thing to bear in mind. And so that really is the failure queue. It's just a system whereby once the max number of attempts have been tried, your message goes onto a failure queue, and then you have that fine-grained control. You can just go and inspect the messages, see which ones you want to retry, see which ones you want to get rid of. If you've enjoyed this video and you'd like YouTube to show you more of my content, all you need to do is subscribe and click the notification icon. And also, if you're interested in my full-length courses, then make sure you check out my site at garyclarke.tech. I'll leave a link on the screen and in the description.